The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
Day 10. The journey grows more and more difficult. The days grow long. The nights grow quiet. Stress level rising. Urge to eat decreasing. The playoffs, the fantasy playoffs, they are taking their toll. I don't know if they're doing the same to you guys, but the fantasy playoffs are killing me. I need a respite. I need a break, and I know there's not one coming, so we grind on. We try to find a way to get to the next level. I talked a little bit on yesterday's podcast. Welcome, by the way, to Fantasy NBA Today. I am Dan Besbris. This is a Hoop Ball presentation, and of course, big thank you to our partners in crime at Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee Company. We'll tell you more about them a little later on in the podcast because it's DFS Day as well. We'll be talking to Mike Apotria on today's show about the DFS contest this evening. I hope you guys have joined it. I have additional thoughts on that as well. I have to try to organize my brain on this Wednesday episode. So I wanted to begin by taking a quick look back at the streaming calendar, and a few things occurred to me yesterday as I was putzing around with my team, staring down the barrel of the fact that I actually had a 2-game night. This is a 16 roster team. I had 2 guys out of 16 playing on my team last night. My opponent had 8, so obviously I now fell behind in the weekly battle. And I knew that was going to hurt my gut, but you just have to grit your teeth and understand that things even out in the long term. But anyway, as I was staring down the barrel of that god-awful evening where I knew I was about to get plastered, I started to look around at my team and think, okay, what's the easiest way to really explain long, medium, and short streaming? And I know we've done boatloads of this on the podcast, so I don't want to spend half the show on it, and we've got a DFS half coming up as well, and I want to make sure that there's ample time for everything. But I think the best way to explain it is you start by looking who plays Sunday, Monday of the next week at the end of your current playoff week. Last week, that was quite a few teams, actually. Looking the 17th and 18th. Highlight them on your streaming calendar, if you so desire. Chicago, Detroit, Miami, New York, Toronto. 5 teams had a back-to-back Sunday, Monday. That makes it really easy because then you look at those 5 teams and you look to see when they play their games prior to that last Sunday of the week. Toronto, well, they didn't play from Thursday, so that wipes them out as a potential streaming candidate. New York, they played on Friday. Okay, that's intriguing. That puts them on the list. Miami, they played Friday. Detroit played Friday. Chicago played Friday. All of those teams last week, you actually could have picked up a guy on Friday and rode him through into Tuesday morning. Then you can even dial it back farther than that. What does their schedule look like before that Friday? Because, again, you're not going to get 3 games in a row. 3 games in 4 nights is a best-case scenario. Then you're looking for, and they don't do 4 and 5 nights anymore, so you're looking for 4 in 6 nights or 5 in 7. Do either of those remaining teams, or what did I say, Chicago, Detroit, and Miami, do any of those 3 remaining teams, and New York, 4 remaining teams, do any of those 4 remaining teams have a 4-game and 6-day span? And Miami did. They played on Wednesday of last week as well. Detroit, same deal. Chicago, no. Okay, so we wiped out Chicago. Easy. Now we've narrowed it down to Detroit, New York, and Miami. And now you know, well, none of those teams go 5 and 7. So at that point, you can basically wipe off any longer streaming, unless you really want to go nuts and you want to stream like 4 or 5 different slots, then you have to look for guys that you're going to hold for an entire week. But in this particular case, when we're trying to stream effectively 3 out of our 4 weekly moves, 3 slots for 4 moves, N-1 is what I've been working with lately. you're looking for guys who can hold for 4 days. That's a pretty safe marker. So that left us with Chicago, Detroit, and New York on Friday of last week. That's already happened. That's an easy game to play. The reason we're doing that is because this coming week, nobody plays Sunday, Monday. So that's going to be a totally different scenario. Okay, so now, still kind of looking backwards at last week, this is a retrospective. What do we do before that? You can assume now that you've made your move to either a Bull, a Piston, or a Knickerbocker on that Friday. You could also, by the way, you could throw the Pelicans into that mix as well because they went Friday, Saturday, and then Monday. Basically just what you're looking for here, instead of saying a team that goes Sunday, Monday, you're looking for a team that goes 2 games in the last 3 days of 1 week and then the first day of the last week. If there are teams that have that opportunity. And like I said, this coming week, there aren't many. Very few. I'm going to go through them here momentarily. There are, I think, 1? It's 1 or 2. Double check myself on this. It might just be 1 team. But last week, there were a few, as we just saw. You could also throw Phoenix and Portland into that mix. They went 3 games in 4 days, where the last day of those 4 is the Monday to start the next week. The only thing you could do that might be different would be a back-to-back on Saturday, Sunday. I don't tend to like that unless the options are so miserable in this 3 games in 4 night scenario I'm presenting that you're left with no other choice. Let's assume, for argument's sake, that the options are okay, like we had last week with Chicago, Detroit, New York, Miami. Wait, Chicago, Pelicans, Suns. That's if you're looking for 3 and 4. If you're looking for 4 and 6 and you want to go even farther back, as we mentioned, that's Miami, New York, and Detroit. That limited it a little bit more. But if you're just looking for 3 and 4, you start on the Monday and you work your way back to Friday from the previous week. If you're using that method and you don't want to extend to a 4 games in 6 days stretch, then you figure, okay, well, I'll be making my previous move on that Friday for the 3 and 4 days, which means I have to start my next backwards reverse chronological streaming calendar on Thursday. So who goes 3 games in 4 days before that Thursday? It was the Jazz. We knew they were a good streaming team. They were, by the way, a pretty good 4 and 6 streaming team if you wanted to, or frankly, they were a good streaming team if you wanted to go 8 games in 13 days. The Oklahoma City Thunder were a good stream the first 4 days of last week. And the Cleveland Cavaliers were a good stream the first 4 days of last week. But, of course, there's another piece of that puzzle, which is if you were not fighting to get into the playoffs, you could actually set your calendar and you could stream kind of front ways. All of this example that I'm doing now assumes that you are fighting to get in and you can't. You basically start your madness on that first day of the playoffs. This is why, by the way, I really like the 4 games in 6 days phenomenon, which is what we had with Miami, Detroit, and New York. If you stretch that out to 4 and 6, you can front load that week with a back-to-back on Monday, Tuesday, because now you've got your next 6 days. That takes you all the way through Sunday of the next week. This, to me, is the best way to start your long stream. So once you get into the following week, where you're already competing for the playoffs, you can't set yourself up really for a back-to-back to start the semifinals unless you had a first-round bye, and we're not discussing that right now. That's a totally different beast. It's a much easier way to set yourself up for the semis. If you had to compete in the first round of the playoffs, which a lot of us did, this is the best way to do it. You try to work your way backwards from the next Monday, look for a 4 and 6 or a 3 and 4, and then work your way backwards. Now, this week, we've already set ourselves up. Hopefully, we did this right the first week, which meant you had a bunch of guys going on Monday of the semifinal round. And then you know that you basically have to somehow find a way to begin making your moves either on Tuesday or Thursday or Wednesday. How do we know? Okay, next point to be made. Look at Monday of finals week and find out if there are any teams that go 3 games in 4 nights, including that Monday as the last day of those 4 nights. The list is extremely short. Memphis. That's it. So if you're streaming looking towards the finals week, where you want to load up and also have a game or two on the first day of next week, Memphis is sort of your only option. If you don't like the options that Memphis presents, let's say that all of those guys are owned in your league and you don't want to stream Bruno Caboclo for 3 games in 4 days, then your next move is to say, you know what? Okay, I'm screwed in that regard. I'm not going to be able to front load finals week. I need to focus on just getting through this week, and I'll deal with finals week when I get there because it's so silly anyway. Then the next thing you look at is teams going 3 games in 4 nights for the last 4 days of this week. You make Sunday your final day marker. Okay, this opens things up a little bit. Charlotte, Denver, Detroit, Golden State, all on the list. You also have Sacramento towards the end of that alphabetical chart that I'm obviously looking at while I do the podcast. And now you have some options. That means that you're working Monday through Wednesday is sort of one chunk of the week. Thursday through Sunday is another chunk of the week. This is all for long streaming. And then the reason that this occurred to me is maybe you have guys that were part of your week front load, right? Like what if you have a guy on your team, like a Jazz or a Wizard, that goes 4 games in 6 days to start the week? I had sort of been overlooking that spot because it is relatively rare. Miami also is in that bucket, which means I should have noticed it because I advised grabbing some Miami Heat last week. What do you do then? Well, this is why you can consider saving some moves for Sunday. And now, when you make your moves on Sunday, you create a new grouping of 4 days. Are there any teams that start on Sunday and go 3 games in 4 days leading into next week? The Lakers are on that list. This is a different chunk now, and they're the only one. So now all of a sudden, if you're making your move on Sunday, don't just grab a guy on Sunday and assume that they're going to be on your team for a couple of days. You want to be set to go for finals week. You might be looking at trying to maximize your streaming, and so you want to pick up a move at the end of this week that allows you to utilize moves on someone else to start next week, but not that same slot again. And that's why long streaming requires a lot of staring at papers. You can hit me with questions. I have no problem with it. Obviously very team specific, but there's so many different ways to patch this thing together, and you don't want to overlook any of them. Tuesday night. Let's break it down. And we'll keep it relatively simple here. Philadelphia at Charlotte. Joel Embiid sat this one out. I streamed Boban in a games cap format, and I feel very foolish about that, because he played 10.5 minutes and was wildly ineffective. Oops. Jeremy Lamb was outstanding for Charlotte. Kemba Walker was in terrible foul trouble in the first half, but he picked it up with 17 second-half points, just not quite enough, and they just didn't get any help. Which is why I was thinking about grabbing a Charlotte Hornet on Tuesday, because they have the sort of off-day schedule, Tuesday, Thursday, and then a couple over the weekend. But there just isn't anybody to pick up on this team. It would have been either Frank Kaminsky or Miles Bridges, and Kaminsky did have 14 points, but those lines just not fun. Houston. This was sort of a blowout, but not really a blowout. The Rockets kept their guys in until about the 2-minute mark of the fourth quarter, so to list it as a game that was decided early is a little bit disingenuous. Both teams used their main guys for most of the ball game. Eric Gordon, by the way, already listed out for the second half of the Rockets back-to-back. I can't believe James Harden is not going to sit out a game, but he's a machine. This is stupid, by the way, and Jonas Nader was telling me earlier that Mike D'Antoni basically said James wouldn't let him rest him for a game. Hey, Mike, what happens to you guys every year? Your superstar runs out of gas in the playoffs. Sit the dude for a week if you have to. These games don't matter. You're locked into the 3 seed almost no matter what you do. It's crazy. But we'll see. We'll see how it pans out. Fantasy owners are pleased about it, I'm sure. Elsewhere, Chris Paul, PJ Tucker, Clint Capella, we're all fine. Daniel House, 19 points in this ball game. I was a little bit worried that there would be a regression coming. We mentioned him as an interesting sort of fringy rocket streamer, and it would have worked out really well for you. He had 6 3-pointers in this game. There's a regression coming. I just don't know when. And then the other guys are not worth using. Austin Rivers, Gerald Green, Kenneth Faried, Gary Clark. Nope. Atlanta's a confusing bunch right now. Nice to see Taurean Prince finally playing with a bit more efficiency. John Collins, Trae Young are all playing well right now. Kevin Huerter has been terrible. Dwayne Dedmon was fine. This is a tough matchup against the Rockets, but he still got his 24-ish minutes, so he's in good shape. And Vince Carter got hot, but you're not going to buy into that for more than a day. Kent Bazemore, 17 minutes. He's out of the rotation, and you can drop him. The Lakers. We just mentioned a team that has generally a pretty bad playoff schedule in this middle chunk. Like, they had a pretty good early playoff schedule, and then it goes through a soft patch. But you could potentially pick up a Laker on Sunday of this week and then just ride them, because at that point they have 5 games over the next 8 days. And you could just hold the Laker through the end of your finals week. Hell, they have a really good schedule until the next Sunday if your season happens to go that far. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope had 35 points in this ball game, but ended up hurting his leg with about 2 minutes to go. If he's playing, he's a pretty good option right now, especially without LeBron, who sat this one out with a sore groin. I think he will play probably like about half of their remaining 12 games, maybe 7 or 8 of them. I don't think they're shutting LeBron down. I do think he wants to keep rolling. I think he'll play the home games, give that Lakers crowd their money's worth. Reggie Bullock played only 24 minutes, which means he's not going to be good enough to use. JaVale McGee is a start right now. Rajon Rondo is a start, even though he's terrible. And Alex Caruso has been playing really well. I sort of warned you guys I thought there'd be a little bit of a regression, but I thought the steals would remain, and he did have 2 more of those. He missed all 6 of his shots, which is a shame. I mean, even if he makes a couple of them, this line changes considerably. And he made all 4 of his free throws, so it could have been a lot worse. I do think he's a worthwhile potential stream starting on that Sunday if you need a little bit of scoring, free throw percent, and defensive stats. Otherwise, you can probably leave him alone. Again, you're hunting here. Brook Lopez, huge game. Chris Middleton, huge game. Niko Mirotic went big with Giannis out. Pat Connaughton played 36 minutes with Giannis out. These things are not going to remain. Giannis missing this one with an ankle injury. You figure this is why they knew LeBron wasn't going to be playing in this ball game, so this was a pretty easy opportunity to rest their superstar coming off that 52-point game against Philly, and it's a back-to-back. I would assume that Antetokounmpo is playing tonight. Milwaukee has a good schedule. Wouldn't be surprised if we saw someone else on the Bucks as a late scratch. Although, it's at Cleveland, so they figure they can win that one. They got Miami, and then they got Cleveland again. It's a pretty easy schedule this week from Milwaukee, and they're in good shape these days. The Buccos have the best record in the NBA by 3 games over anybody, so they can mess around a little bit down the stretch if they want to. Be warned. We got some should I drop Nico questions after a couple of bad ball games, and that was a hard no a few days ago, especially with the Brogdon injury. His role was going to get bigger. And then as everybody else gets rested, his role is going to get bigger because they're still trying to figure out where exactly he fits. And Chris Middleton finally had a huge ball game. Took him, what was the last one? Like December? Took him half the year. Eric Bledsoe, his free throw percentage, atrocious. Just atrocious. Golden State on the back-to-back in Minnesota got a win. This was a tough one, flying up from Texas, but Minnesota's just not very good right now. Karl-Anthony Towns had a 20-20 game, but he turned it over 7 times. Andrew Wiggins had 20 points in 41 minutes. Tyus Jones, 10-7 with an assist. But Minnesota, not a great playoff calendar. Jeff Teague, Derrick Rose may or may not play at any point in the not-too-distant future. Josh Okogie now with 2 good games in a row. But you're always worried if you're thinking about trying to drop a Timberwolf into your lineup, there's really no good time to do it. They have a back-to-back the 29th and the 30th towards the tail end of your finals week, but it doesn't come with anything good on either side of it unless your season keeps going. So I don't know that I would recommend a Timberwolf in almost any capacity. there's with as many injured guys as there are, if Derrick Rose came back and they said he was going to play 24 to 30 minutes, I might drop him in there, but boy, that's a tough pill to swallow with the number of guys that are injured and just who's going to play on any given night. I mean, you pick up Josh Okogie for 2 games, someone comes back, he turns into dust. You pick up Derrick Rose, if he comes back, he might play 1 game and then sit the other one. I think I'd avoid them. Interesting to see the Warriors play most of their guys in this back-to-back. That means that someone's getting rest towards the end of the week. Keep an eye on that. Brooklyn, winners on the road in Sacramento in overtime. D'Angelo Russell, 44-12. He went absolutely ape-bleep in the fourth quarter and overtime. This is a much-needed win for the Nets, too. They'd been scuffling on this road trip. This gets them back to a game over 500 and a game and a half ahead of the Miami Heat. 3 games ahead of the Magic. Big swing. If they lost this one, they go 2 games up on a playoff spot. That's a huge win. D'Angelo. I mean, this is the thing. Hey, remember, not to toot my own horn or anything, but I did say I think I'd probably start him this week in a 2-game week. That might have been on our weekly lineup show. I forget where I said it. But because the Kings and the Lakers were the opponents, I figured he'd have a big one against the Lakers. He ended up having a big one against the Kings. So I got the right answer for the wrong reasons. Oh well, still counts. I thought Spencer Dinwiddie would have a pretty good game in this one. He didn't. Really, almost nobody else did. For Sacramento, Marvin Bagley, he's rolling these days, but Kings are effectively eliminated. So I don't know what the plan is now. They're 7 games out of a playoff spot. They're 2 games under 500. Clippers with winning just repeatedly, 8 of their last 10. Clippers are they're a game away from getting home court. 2 games, excuse me. The Trailblazers losing McCollum. Spurs have won 9 in a row, Jazz 4 in a row, Clippers 3 in a row. Western Conference playoff teams starting to exert their influence a little bit here. What do the Kings do down the stretch? Because they are basically mathematically eliminated. I know that they're not technically. Something horrible and crazy could happen, but it won't. Do they start to shuffle some bodies around? Do you see someone like a Willie Cauley-Stein get pushed aside? He started, but he only played 19 minutes. Bagley played 29. Bjelica still got 28 in this one. He was actually the winner, and Willie Cauley-Stein was the loser. I thought maybe Harry Giles would see closer to 24 minutes as they start to shift pieces around. Bogdan Bogdanovic has totally disappeared. I think you're going to see plenty of De'Aaron Fox even down the stretch. Harrison Barnes, veteran they brought in. I mean, do you start to sit him down? The Kings could end up being a treasure trove next week. Question is there a time you could grab them? The answer is yes. Tuesday of next week, March 26th. Or, if you want to sort of get ahead of the curve on this team and try to plan ahead, they have 6 games over 9 days starting on the 23rd against the Suns. Kings have a really good schedule starting on Saturday of this week and ride them through the end of finals week. Problem is, any of these guys on your wire? I doubt it. I don't think so. I think Bjelica is probably the one that I might say is a maybe. Problem is, his last couple of games, 19 and 18 minutes, he combined for a total of 12 points and 11 rebounds. So can you trust it? It just seems like Willie Cauley-Stein is the man on the outside looking in. I would think that Harry Giles would actually be the one that wins out, but we shall see. We shall see. They're basically cooked. Now would be the time you might start to see some shifting. And then Indiana on a tough back-to-back. They made it a pretty good game with the Clippers. LA pushed out to a decent-sized lead. Indy fought back. Miles Turner had 5 more blocks. Domantas Sabonis, 13, 16, and 6 off of the bench. No Darren Collison, and they probably could have used him in this one. Got a lot off the bench. Tyreek Evans had 19 and 29 bench minutes. Those are the guys that brought him back. Bench guys did it for Indy. Dougie McBuckets had 17. Do I think this is something that's going to last? Nah. Not unless we find out Collison's going to miss multiple games. Then you might take a look at Tyreek. But the last time he had an opportunity, he crapped all over it. Corey Joseph ended up doing a little bit more. So, and plus, at this point, we sort of missed our window with Indiana. They had the back-to-back to start the week. They got one more on Thursday, and then their schedule gets ultra light until Wednesday of next week. Patrick Beverley just keeps rolling. What a wonderful grab he was. Old man Bev. Gallo was good. Shai was good. He's been playing better these days. Montrez was good. Lou Williams struggled, but did have 9 assists. And Ivica Zubac's 12-9. That's sort of what we promised you. Landry Shamet finally had an off game. I think he'll likely bounce back in the next one. And that's your fantasy, your season-long look at Tuesday night. Wednesday, we're going to break down from a DFS standpoint. So we'll bring in our good friend Mike Apotria to talk to us about Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee Company, the contest. Oh, yeah, the contest. Before I say hi to Mike, the contest. It's $375 in prizes, regardless. Regardless of what, you ask, Dan? Well, thank you for asking. Regardless of how many people sign up for it. It's so easy. Here's the thing. I'm a man who likes to win more than I like a fair competition. I would rather 75 people show up, and then I've got a better chance to win money. I would actually also like the room to fill up because it looks better. But really, at this point in the year, this is your time, man. If you've been thinking about it, hop on in. You know, we didn't hit the 125 mark last week. This is the end of the season, so people are paying a little bit less attention. You're going to see, 100 people or 95 people or whatever. So your odds of winning go up. The prize stays the same, and there are just fewer people you have to beat. It's brilliant. Don't tell anybody I sent you, but come join our DFS contest. It's just $3 to enter. Top 20 slots pay $18.75 a piece. First place wins a hoop ball t-shirt. Second place gets Hawaiian Isles Kona coffee. And I know there's a man out there who's guzzling it right now because he doesn't sleep at night, and that is Mike Apotria. Good afternoon, Mike.
And good morning, Dan.
Yeah, we figured this out.
Time zone thing down. We got it figured out now. Going forward, I think we're going to be on point with it.
Yeah. Your confidence is contagious, my good man. How are you today?
I'm doing good. We got our DFS contest tonight. So, these are always my favorite days. These are the days I like to do a little bit of extra research because I guess I know people are going to be listening and looking at my stuff a little bit more. So I want to be on point for you guys. And I think I got some good stuff for you today.
Do you now? Okay, well, my interest is piqued, I'll admit. But first things first, you got to tell me what I did wrong last week. That's how the story goes. See if we can learn anything from it. Last week I got 30th. I actually did okay. I mean, it's my usual, almost misfire. There's always one or two things that I could have done better. It was a hard week last week. Can we just agree on that? It didn't take much to place. You only needed 245 points to win money last week. Is that how 6-game cards often go?
No. 6-game cards are generally going to be a little, lower scoring than like a 9 or a 10 game, just because there's going to be more options, more guys can explode on any given night. But this was a classic case of a lot of chalk busted, a lot of high play guys. Avery Bradley, I was touting him all day. There was no way he should be this cheap, we said. In that same spot against Atlanta, I would play him again. But in our contest, he was 51% owned, and he scored 6.75 DraftKings points. So half the contest was sunk unless they did everything else right. That was hard to come back from for a lot of people. And it was just a low-scoring day overall. I mean, our high score was 300, and that would have placed you pretty well in a lot of GPPs as well. That was a pretty high score overall. And in his lineup, he did the reverse. He played CJ Miles. He was only 5% owned, 5.8, and he scored 39. So that's a classic case of fading the chalk. And that's what I always talk about. It's not always worth doing in smaller contests necessarily. Our contests that we do, we have 125 entry spots, but entering one of these contests with 40,000 people, you're trying to really separate yourself. And if you have a hunch that Avery Bradley is going to be 40, 35, 50% owned, a crazy margin, and CJ Miles has the same capability of exploding off the bench. Bradley could get in foul trouble. There's so many avenues to him busting where it's okay to hedge your bet one time and maybe throw a lineup in there with Miles. That would have cashed out very well.
Yeah, and the other note on that is, Srochi, I think is that Srokai. He never told me how to pronounce this. I'd been emailing with the dude. The other note on this is second place was 276. So it wasn't even like a bunch of folks got near that 300 mark. That was just one guy, and then the drop-off was pretty substantial. Although, Mike, you did win with two of yours at 264 and 266. No, 263 and 264, 6th and 7th place, so can't complain too much, right? You also had 253. You won with all three of your lineups last week.
Yeah, and I got lucky because I had Bradley in all three. I told you, I'm very transparent the way I play. If I recommend a guy and tout him very highly, there's a good chance I played him in a lot. And like I said, I probably rolled out 10 to 15 lineups on this card. I always do them on Wednesdays. I try to do at least 10 to 20 in the Massfield GPPs. I hand build, so I don't sit there and generate 150. But I probably had CJ Miles and maybe one. I was very high in Bradley. I hedged my bet when I entered GPP. I never 100% anybody, but I was so confident in him. I was ready to 80% lock him. And I was pretty fortunate to still be able to cash. I still had a lot of other good plays. Rudy Gobert, DeMarcus Cousins was somebody I was very high on, and he was low owned. Chris Paul's in a great spot, and Aaron Gordon just did solid. But it was mostly because I played a lot of low owned guys that did well, and I avoided a lot of the other chalky guys at the same time.
So here's the guys that I obviously would have changed going forward. Avery Bradley, we've already talked about. Terrence Ross was one that we had talked about on the show that I was a little bit hesitant on. I even mentioned it on, I think I may have even tweeted. No, I don't remember. I might have just said it in my own head because his game is so reliant on scoring. And if that's not happening, then things can turn a little quick. I also thought Dwayne Wade, I got a little bit weird and went with one guy that I thought would be low owned. I figured he would end up having a role in that game. Miami, Detroit, these are teams fighting for the bottom of the Eastern Conference playoff. I figured it would be a good ball game, and Miami blew him out by 34 points. So that one didn't play out the way I expected. Despite basically three guys that all kind of wet themselves, I was still only, about 9-10 points away from actually placing because I went Aaron Gordon. That was one we hadn't really talked about, and he was okay. Delon Wright ended up playing pretty well. I ended up going to both of the shooting guards in that Memphis game, and that was probably stupid, right, Mike? I should have just picked one and rolled with it. If you roll with both, what are the odds that both of those guys end up blowing up on the same night? You've warned me about this. I did it anyway. At least it worked for one of the two, but you kind of need 2 out of 2. Oops.
It's not a bad strategy given that matchup. It's Atlanta, so you know that there's going to be a high points total, and they're going to be playing at an increased pace. But when you're playing 2 guys at the same position and one's coming off the bench, you have to understand there's unless it's 2 prominent players, odds are they're gonna correlate with each other's minutes. It's very rarely. Wright and Bradley are 2 people that could close the game and play in the fourth quarter. But odds are when Bradley comes off, it's going to be Wright playing point or playing shooting guard next to Conley. But there will be 5 or 6 minutes, I'm sure, next to each other. So it's not a terrible option. I actually have a combo tonight I feel is kind of comfortable with playing both of them. We'll get to them. I got a good one. It's going to be a little teaser, but I generally don't like to play, let's say, I'm going to say 2 guards from the same team. But I think tonight we have an option.
Oh, you're getting silly with me now. All right, let's transition to this week. Is it worth going back and talking about the ones that actually hit last week and why that happened? Why don't we do that, actually? Let's take the next 2 to 3 minutes to talk about the ones that worked as opposed to the ones that didn't. John Collins was a name you had mentioned on the show last week, and he was probably the most important player to have in your DFS lineup last Wednesday. Why did that work out so well?
Well, this is just a matchup. I talked about it, I think. Memphis, they're not the same Memphis team, obviously, and one of their weaker spots to attack is power forward. This was a spot where John Collins just had all the opportunity. It was just a picture perfect matchup, and I didn't like a lot of the power forward options that there was on the slate anyway. So you also have to take that into account. It's not always just about the price. John Collins' price wasn't picture perfect for the matchup. It was a good matchup, but if we had some cheaper options that I thought were in great spots as well, I might have went there. But if you notice in a lot of my lineups, I stuck with either, John Collins, Jabari Parker. I think I hedged one with Dwayne Dedman, Aaron Gordon. I played a lot of the same forwards, and that's because I didn't like a lot of the forwards that were available in the pool. So sometimes it's worth spending up on a guy if you don't like anything below him.
All right. Now we can transition to this week. So where do we begin? This is always my first question to you. Where do we begin, Mike? Do we begin with the expensive guys, the cheap guys, the injury news, the totals on the card? What's our starting point as we begin to build tonight's DFS contest card?
Well, we have a ton of injuries to worry about, and some breaking right before we do this. So it just keeps popping up, and it's actually one that would have helped us if we knew last week. Speaking on Avery Bradley, he got ruled out tonight, and we know CJ Miles is done for the year. So now we kind of know that we have some value over there. We know that Delon Wright's going to kind of pop, or Delon Wright's going to pop up. Terrell Wright, that's a throwback. Delon Wright is going to pop up.
They are brothers.
He was a very significant fantasy player here and there when he's near min salary, but Yeah, but we got to look at DeLon right now. He's only 4,800. It's going to be a matchup against Houston. If they stay close, we got to expect the scoring to come from somewhere, and there's not many options. You got to expect that the front court's going to struggle a little bit, being Valanciunas and Joakim Noah. It's not really a fit game for them. Those guys, we look at Houston, they chuck more threes than just about anybody, and those guys struggle to get out to the three-point line. So, those are some guys I'm looking at. And on the other side of the ball, one of my favorite value plays is going to be Daniel House. They've been just trying. Dan Antonio's just trying to get this guy minutes as much as possible. He's even said it himself. Kenneth Reed's questionable. Eric Gordon's getting a rest day, so he's going to have an avenue to play some 3, some 4, some 2. They're going to mix and match, and it's going to be hard pressed to not see this guy getting at least 28 to 32 minutes at 3,900 on DraftKings. So, other than that, I'm not too thrilled about this game in general. I think those are a couple spots I'm going to go to. Conley's always been lighting it up. But it's going to be hard for me to spend $7,900 on Conley when there's so many other guards that I like around a similar price range, which we'll probably get to in a couple minutes. But for that game, that's really all I'm going to. But I mean, for the other guy, actually, we'll just get right to it, Dan.
Yeah, let's
just get right to it.
Okay, let's do this thing in some sort of organized fashion. I don't know what the best way is to do it because every show I try a new way and just to see which one sticks. Let's start with the injury replacements, okay? Because we've already gotten into that a little bit. Are there any other ones floating around on the card that they're going to be well owned, but in a contest that has 100 to 125 people, you sort of might as well just take the free square? Does anybody else fall into that category besides DeLon Wright?
Fred VanVleet. We just heard Kyle Lowry got ruled out, so we can expect him to start, play 30 minutes. It's going to be a competitive game against OKC. Should be pretty tight one for all 4 quarters, I'm expecting, and he's going to garner a lot of usage. And he's good price tag. I think he's 4,700, and he's going to be the chalky one. So yes, I wouldn't consider him a free square for the simple fact of I think we have other options right around that price range, like we just mentioned, DeLon Wright, and one of my favorite plays in that same price range is going to be Dwayne Wade. This is Dwayne Wade going against Popovich in San Antonio. This is going to be one of his last curtain calls over there. He's got some respect for Pop. Pop's got respect for him. And I saw a tweet in a recent report saying Dwayne Wade, Spoelstra is just going to let the reins off of him. There's no point he said, what are we resting him for anymore? There's a small stretch left in the season. We're just going to let him do his thing. And we saw him play 33 minutes last game. So if we can expect something close to that at 4,800, you sign me up. He's one of my favorite plays tonight, especially when I mentioned earlier, a little sneak peek of 2 guards you could play in the backcourt. Well, Dragic's slowly creeping up to 30 minutes, and he's only 5,300. He played 29 minutes last game in a back-to-back. So there's a chance that both these guys play 30 minutes in a game against the Spurs, should be competitive. They need to win this game, and they're both underpriced.
Okay, so I'm slowly slotting these guys into my lineup right now. Almost all of the names that we've mentioned so far are guards. We're going to have to throw in some forwards in here, right?
Well, this is where you mix and match. Yes, definitely. And I don't think a lot of the value is going to be at forward today. So I'm going to be looking to get some of my values with the guards. And I know I don't like a lot of center spots on the board either. So I'm doing a good amount I can do to try to get Embiid in there. It's 10K, but he's coming off a rest game. This is a picture perfect matchup for him against Boston. He loves to play them. It's going to be competitive. So at center, that's one place I'm looking. Nurkic is another guy I'm looking at. Lopez. And other than that, I'm spending up, like I said, on that forward spot. We have Aaron Gordon. You were hyping him up before. He's in another great matchup. This is going to be an up-tempo game. Very competitive. Magic want to win. Points are going to bleed. He's got one of the highest totals on the board, and he's a guy that could just easily rack up rebounds and points very quickly in this kind of game pace. We have to look at marketing. He's been playing like complete garbage. Hot garbage, actually. He's been burning me.
Warm garbage. My favorite temperature garbage.
New York City, hot garbage, July afternoon.
Oof.
It's
fetid is the word for that. That's fetid.
This is a great matchup, and Zach LaVine is questionable. The usage, at one point this guy was averaging 40 to 50 DraftKings points per night. It's somewhere in them, and if there's a matchup he's going to have it in, it's this one. So I'm trying to get some exposure over there with those 2 forwards. Doncic is in a great spot at 8,900. He's always got that 50 to 60 point upside. If this game stays close, it's generally because of him. And another one of my favorite plays to target is that little mid-tier forward, Jabari Parker. 6K. Don't look now. The guy's been playing 30 minutes a game for the past 3-4 games. at only 6K. He's going against his old team. Bulls bleed points. This is a good matchup for him. So I guess you could say Bobby Portis is in there too, but I'd probably rather opt to spend for Parker than Portis myself.
So what kind of money does this leave floating around? I'm trying to keep up with you here and build the lineup while we talk. I'm throwing Jabari Parker in there. I've got Goran Dragic, Dwayne Wade, Aaron Gordon, Jabari Parker, Freddie VanVleet, Delon Wright. That leaves me a center and a forward spot, and I've got $17,000 left to spend. So I can go up the ramp a little bit. If I throw Joel Embiid in there, then I got $7,200. How are we doing here? How's my lineup looking?
Well, another forward I like that's kind of you want to spend a little money on too. You can also slot him in the spender spot. It's going to be Julius Randle. We have to look at both him and Elfrid Payton. I don't care how much Elfrid Payton gets priced up. The dude's triple-doubling every night, and what are they playing for? These two guys are definitely in play. They both should have tons of usage. I mean, I fiddled with playing with him at center a little bit too. In lineups, I'm not going with Embiid, and other ones I'm coming down to Nurkic because one of my favorite plays on the board is another guard. So this is what I mean. We have options here. You can differentiate your lineup. You can, I guess pivot off of the Van Vliet chalk if you'd like, and just simply put Dwayne Wade in that spot because another guard spot I'm certainly going to use, and I'd say at least half my lineup tonight is going to be Damian Lillard. He's 8,800. He's underpriced. It's him or nothing now. No CJ McCollum. He's going to take 25 to 30 shots, handle the ball. We'll see his assists go up a little bit. You're going to be hard-pressed to make some decisions with these guard spots. And that's kind of why you got to look at all this other value that we do have. Fiddle around with it a little bit. On DraftKings, it's not like a lot of other platforms. We have position eligibility in spots you wouldn't think of. There's not many other sites where you have a point guard that's eligible at small forward. We have two of those on this slate.
So how does okay? So I don't even. We're like well beyond my realm of knowledge here to talk about what other DFS sites are able to offer. This is, Mike, where I always get hung up. The last few choices, a lot of stuff that seems fairly straightforward. How are you able to process the matchups? I know you said you make a few different lineups. What if you were just making one, like I'm doing? How do you narrow it down to your favorite?
I see. At the end of the day, I just try to construct a lineup where I feel comfortable and I like every single guy in every single spot. So you were just saying that we had plenty of guards. I mentioned a guard. I want to get Damian Lillard in there. So I would say maybe try taking out one of your like 4,800 to 5K guards. Pick one of them that you really think's in a good spot that you think is going to be good. Slot Damian Lillard in there, and then in one of those forward spots that you had open, maybe slot Daniel House because he's only about 3,900. He could play forward, should see decent minutes. It's a good value play, and see where that leaves you. If you get somewhere to center where you really feel comfortable, then play that guy. If not, well, then maybe understand that, okay, now who's the guy I like the second worst? Who I think is going to do the second worst in my lineup? And then fiddle with that. Try taking that out. But at the end of the day, you just want to make sure you feel comfortable. It's you making the lineups. We can, you can sit here and get all the advice, and I could tell you who my favorite plays are, and I'm going to play those guys because I feel comfortable about them. But you want to make sure you feel comfortable about every guy in your lineup.
So back to the New Orleans game. That's the one that I'm hovering over right now. Are you at all worried about Orlando's defense? Because it's not bad. Their defense is pretty good.
Their defense is excellent. And I've mentioned that several times on the podcast, several times. I generally try not to. I wouldn't say I try not to target teams against them, but this is going to be a high-scoring game. And Orlando's a team that generally doesn't play at a fast pace, but they're willing to speed up their pace with other teams that will. So we see them kind of keep up. So I do expect these Pelicans to still see a little bump, a little uptick, and we kind of understand where we're targeting. It's not get too cute here. It's Elfrid Payton or it's Julius Randle. If you want a dumpster dive, you can go to Darius Miller, but I think we have other options where, he'd be a pivot off of Daniel House, but I don't think we need to go there. I think those are the two guys if you're playing, and on the other side, you have some options. DJ Augustine's been getting an uptick in minutes. Every game that's been close, he's played about 30 minutes. They're trying to win. It's a good matchup. Aaron Gordon. Vucevic is a little expensive. I'd probably just go to Embiid. So I might just cross him off and just boom, right there. The guys I'd probably be looking at would be Aaron Gordon and DJ Augustine. And if you wanted to take a couple tournament flyers, Fournier and Isaac are always tournament flyer guys. But if, like you said, if you're building one lineup, I narrow it down. I would only feel comfortable out of that game on the Magic side with Augustine and Gordon in one lineup, and the same thing vice versa on the other side with Payton and Randle.
Yeah, Randall feels like a pretty good one with Anthony Davis, I think, being ruled out, right? He's sitting this one out for rest, so he's not even taking his normal 20 minutes?
No, it's going to be strictly. And what that means is that we're going to see a lot of Randall at center, which is a big difference than Randall playing power forward next to AD. Totally different game. His rebounds, his usage, everything skyrockets when he plays center.
Holy moly. Of course, in season long, my opponent definitely has Julius Randle. There was no way around that this week. And I'm waiting on Kevin Love and Zach LaVine. That's just my stress level, Mike, is through the roof. How's your season long stuff going? I pivot here quickly to check in on you.
I'm doing okay. My hometown league, you always hear me talk about that being my favorite one. Well, I got bounced last week. That wasn't good for me. It wasn't good for me. It was an uphill battle. No excuses though. I used my pickups. I did what I could do. I came down to the stretch. It was I just squeaked in. I had Anthony Davis. I had guys, bouncing off the injury report left and right with Dinwiddie, Draymond, Chris Dunn. I had a lot of guys I was confident with going in. I got the injury bug this year. It bit me hard.
Yeah. I'm praying that my team can survive this darn thing. Okay, so here's what I'm looking at right now, Mike. I've got the framework of my lineup built in. Would you throw anybody else? Would you even look at a guy like a Kawhi Leonard tonight? He's been playing relatively well. No Kyle Lowry. Will they have to rely on him a little bit more?
I do like Leonard. Don't get me wrong. Leonard's definitely in play. He's a solid play. You have to understand, he is going to see a usage bump no matter what. What I try to do, though, is if I see another guy I like in another game that's a similar price range, well, who else is going to take advantage of that usage bump? It's Van Vliet will, too. So there's a way to still get some advantage from Kyle Lowry being out, but still being able to target another guy you like at that similar price range that isn't Kawhi Leonard. Like if you wanted to go up a little bit towards like Lillard or Doncic or Julius Randle's the same price, and that might sound crazy. Kawhi Leonard versus Julius Randle, the same price, easy pickings right there, but it's really not. They're still going to spread the ball over there, especially with, Serge Ibaka back. Gasol's probably going to come off the bench. There's going to be other guys to take shots on that offense, so not opposed to it. And if you're going to do that, then I would probably look to get somebody on the other side of the ball as well. Just hope that game stays really close, and it's because, we get a Westbrook versus Kawhi matchup or a Paul George versus Kawhi matchup. One of those games where they just, fourth quarter keep coming down the court and hitting their shots. But he's also small forward eligible, and I don't like a lot of small forwards. He's in play. Not my favorite. I like him. It's hard you can't rule out. That's what I mean. I didn't mention James Harden, but again, you can't rule out these guys who are superstar players who can just get hot and score 55. But again, if they're in my first lineup, no, he's not going to be in my first lineup. He probably wouldn't be in my first 5 to 10.
I'm struggling here with my last two picks. The question that I'm dealing with, Mike, is do I go Damian Lillard at a guard spot and then hunt for a forward in the 48 to 5,400 range, or do I stay with Goran Dragic at the guard spot and use my 8,500 to 9,000 on the guard? Which way would you lean if you had to make that choice?
Well, you can probably. I want Lillard in my lineups. That's me. I think he can easily be the highest scorer on the slate. I'm investing a lot into that, though. It's a lot to say. Mm-hmm. You can go either way with that and probably still pan out pretty well. I would probably try to get Lillard in there and see what I can hunt around and forward. I mean, something we could keep an eye on is Al Horford's status, because if not, Marcus Morris seems like you'd have enough money for him. They'd probably need his body going against Philly, so that's a spot you could look at. Or like I said, just you can always keep fiddling. There's a few other value plays at forward and at guard. I mean, I didn't mention guys like, Brandon Knight and Marquise Chris. If that game gets out of hand, these guys will see garbage time and see minutes. They're not my first plays. They're not optimal, but they're there. If your last guy you're plugging in there is Brandon Knight and you look at his box scores and you can see he's been playing about 20 to 28 minutes, it's 3,500, and you're allowed to feel absolutely comfortable about your other 7 spots, then he's in play.
Do we know if Luka Doncic is playing tonight?
I'm expecting him to play. Everything I've seen is pointing him to play, and if he doesn't, that completely changes everything. That takes a lot of wind out of my sails, and I would, like I said, you have to be able to adjust. I might back off of Lillard a little bit if Doncic is out, as good as I still think he could be. Like I said, there's other pivots that we can go to at that point, where if I know Lillard's going to be highly owned and that game has a good chance to get out of hand, I can easily just go over there to Kyrie Irving or one of those other guys that are a similar price range.
What about Niko Mirotic as a cheap forward?
What I want to see is if Giannis is out. And again, if Giannis is out, then I didn't mention Bledsoe. I didn't mention Middleton. I didn't mention Mirotic or Lopez.
Right, yeah.
All those guys are in play again. I don't have that news right now, and that's a big thing. Just because I didn't mention them, Don't go just, making a lineup and, lock it in. That's it. No, if we hear those guys are out, you're going to have to change your lineup. Nikola Mirotic becomes a great value play. Bledsoe and Middleton are both underpriced for Giannis being out. And then we also have to look at the other side of the ball too, because now this game has a chance to stay slightly more competitive. And, Chetty Osman might be in at 5,700. Kevin Love, if he plays, might be in play too. So it would change drastically. It really does change the slate. Just little news. That's not little news. That's potential MVP candidate being rolled out. But everything has to be adjusted. And, you have all this time. That's a big advantage. If you have that time where you can just keep your eye on it slowly, you don't have to sit there and tinker with it all day long. But whenever you get an alert or some news breaks or you hop on Twitter and you see something, take a look at your lineup and see, okay, where would I be able to adjust? And if you still feel confident after the news, then just keep rolling.
All right, a question between some forward and centers here. I'm narrowing it down. I'm on my last spot to fill in. I can pick either a forward or a center, basically, because I can move some bodies around on my lineup here. Brook Lopez versus Marcus Morris versus Kelly Olynyk versus Bam Adebayo, Joakim Noah. All these guys are in the mix in that 5,000 to 5,300 range. Do any of those names jump above the pack to you?
I would say it would be Marcus Morris if Horford's out. I mean,
Okay.
You still have a little wiggle room if Horford's in because he's been playing about 30, 35 minutes. I think he played about Philly 3 times this year and is averaging about 30 DK points. So there's a little wiggle room for some value. And if he double doubles, he can get to 39 or 40, which we've seen his upside. The only real center, the cheapest center I'm actually going with though on tonight would probably be Robin Lopez. It's really underwhelming. Anything below that. I mean, if we have the news that Giannis is out, then we could go back to Brook. He'd be a very favorite for the chalk play after his great game he had last game. So, I'm kind of trying to spend up a little bit more on center. That's my angle.
Gotcha.
That's what I meant. It's kind of like my John Collins approach I took last week. I just don't feel that comfortable about any of those guys below there winning a tournament tonight. I just don't feel too confident in that. And I don't mean to say that in this tournament. Don't get me wrong. I make all these lineups I make are for Massfield GPP contests where I look to try to, finish in first out of 40,000 people. And you got to imagine you want every guy in your lineup to be able to get you 40 to 50 points. If they're not capable of that, if I don't think they're capable of that on this slate, then I cross them off right away.
Dang. All right, well, this is the fight that I will be fighting now. I'm going to figure this thing out. I'll make my play, and then I'll close my eyes, and we'll see what happens. The wonderful, the magical, the merry? I don't know. I'm trying to alliterate.
I could be jolly. I could be jolly.
Thank you. I'm working on other M words for you. Mike Apotria, at Mike Apotria on Twitter. Give him a follow immediately. Come join our DFS contest, as I said earlier in the show. With the end of the season approaching here, the contest might not be full, and that's actually better for you because the prize money stays the same. It just means you get a better shot to win it. Mike, good luck this evening. We'll talk to you soon.
Always a pleasure, Dan.
He is Mike Apotria. He is the best. The best. He deals with my dumb questions every week. He answers them like they're not that dumb. And then I sit over here staring at my DraftKings board and thinking, all right, do I want to put in Robin Lopez? Do I want to put in CJ McCollum? No, not CJ McCollum. Obviously, he's out. Do I want to put in Dwight Powell? Do I want to put in Bobby Portis? This would seem like the game where Portis could wake back up again, but who the hell knows with some of these guys? This is where I always run into trouble. I end up picking the wrong guys. The one thing I think I did well the week that I actually placed and won was that I didn't pick anybody that totally took a dump on the card. That's going to be my key here. I think I have some good values, and I just have to make sure the other guys I throw in there are not going to go full stinker on me. You got to get like 25 points out of everybody, and then you hope for a couple of guys to pop off a little bit. A little bit of upside there. That's the goal. We'll see how this thing goes. This was DFS Day. Happy DFS Day, everyone. It's Wednesday on Fantasy NBA Today. Good luck this evening. Obviously, with the news this morning, we just talked about it here on with Mike. A guy like DeLon Wright becomes a really good pickup in season long for the rest of the year as well. You can look at guys like Cheick Diallo, who probably will play more if Anthony Davis is resting more ball games. We also heard rumors this morning that LeBron James will not be shut down, so don't do anything crazy with respect to the LA Lakers. Good luck in the contest. You can find the link on Twitter. You can also join our email list if you want. You can do that by just hitting me up on Twitter as well. You can go to the forums. We have a thread if you want to get on the DFS mailing list. That's fine. And rate and review the podcast if you like what you're listening to. But we'll wrap this thing up now, right? You guys don't need to hear the long promo at the end of the show. Thanks, as always, for listening. Half Size Thursday coming up tomorrow, live with Brewski, our penultimate, the second to last live show with Brew on Friday. That's coming up this week. We'll do a recorded one next week, and then the last live show will be that last Friday of the NBA regular season, rolling into that final half week. We are very close to the end here, folks. Hang in there, everybody. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.